I live in the Krokono Mountains, but I beekeep in several locations, not only in the mountains but also in Semily and Jin. I mention this so that someone does not think that here in the mountains is somehow unfriendly region for varroa, or that there is a small bee population and that it is easy to keep bees without chemical treatment or without acids. I only treat bee colonies everywhere with biotechnical interventions. I have not used any chemicals or acids preventively in the hive for almost 10 years. In this video I will list the most important biotechnical interventions of the year. I used to film each individual intervention on a separate video, which you can find on my channel, but now I will edit it down to just an informative video. What I've been doing this past year with the bee colony step by step. Professor Seeley of Cornell University has been tracking wild bee colonies in one region for nearly 50 years before and after the arrival of varroa. He's been verifying through genetic testing that they are still descendants of the bees he started researching 50 years ago. The bees live in balance with the mites and the viruses. No one treats them, but also, and this is important, no one harms them or prevents them from using their natural defenses against parasites like the bees in our hives. I will therefore list the most necessary interventions in the year as I do them so that the colony can live as in nature and prevent the multiplication of varroa by its own mechanisms and immunity. These simple interventions are indispensable for the colony. They have been occurring naturally for millions of years, they are part of the evolution of bees and they allow the colony to regulate parasites and viruses. Bee colonies have lived in harmony with nature since time immemorial. Man has broken that harmony with his hives, his methodologies, and his ignorance. For millions of years, bees have been able to solve all problems, including various parasites, predators. A few thousand years ago, they even lived with the varroa parasite. That they can't do it now is not the fault of bad colonies, some faulty immunity, but the fault of beekeepers and beekeepers alone. In short, if we abandoned all the bees and put them in empty hives in the spring with no baffles and stopped paying attention to them, most would survive and live their eternal happy lives in harmony with varroa and viruses. Just like the bees in the woods around Professor Seeley. To understand renegative biotech beekeeping, one must consider the incongruity of bee life in nature and in our hives. That life is very different. And it is necessary to create simple conditions like those of bees in nature. The bee has a quality immune system proven by evolution, which beekeepers disrupt with their methodologies, allowing varroa and viruses to enter its body, that is, inside the brood. Unfortunately, man, by starting to use interstitial walls in the brood box that do not allow the bees to build their natural work, has nullified their natural immunity and pathogens easily penetrate the worker brood. Anyone who has tried free building or disassembled a wildflower will have noticed the difference in cell composition in the comb of free building and building on a mesh wall. That's where the immunity of the colony is locked in. And that immunity is further eroded by the beekeeper leaving them old work in the brood box in the spring. He deprives the bees of their greatest defense mechanism, which is to build new brood each year. The annual new brood building is, not only in my opinion, the most essential task that bees lack in our hives. In a wild bee colony, rodents destroy the entire old brood nest each year over the winter and the colony must build a new brood nest before the cherry blossoms and raise enough bees for a May brood. But not in conventional hives. Here, the new generation is raised in the old work and the construction takes place only at the first nectar laying, and the construction is still mainly in the brood or in the brood and not in the brood. We who beekeep biotechnically and therefore without chemicals and acids will therefore do a simple operation at the time of the flowering of the brood, in our case the beginning of March. We remove almost all the unfertilized combs in the brood. This leaves the colony with only the combs with the brood and then a few combs with the worker cells as the skeleton of the future brood in the substructure. That's where the brood will continue to expand. The colony must build up all the empty brood until the first brood, just as it has done in cavities for millions of years. To do this, they must have enough stores from last year. With this construction and the heat produced by the bees in the construction, neither parasite nor virus can reproduce and anyone can easily test this for themselves. I have been showing this for several years in videos, footage of which I used for this video. This is footage of the March brood expansion and stock scraping in honey bees. The most important task is to not let the parasite multiply and to protect the worker fruit. Building new brood and proper cell distribution in the brood is what keeps the mite from multiplying. Bees must develop a temperature of 44 degrees Celsius to produce wax. To do this, they accumulate in curtains around the entire brood. Why they do this I don't know yet, but due to the temperature of the bees and therefore the temperature of the entire strings during construction, it will certainly have a significant purpose for the health of the bees themselves and the colony as a whole. In any case, the conditions during construction are unsuitable for mite reproduction and purgative for the colony. We therefore try to keep the building in the brood as long as possible. From March to the end of May. You don't have to agree with me, but everyone can try and evaluate in the autumn. The advantage of this operation is also in the huge one-time renewal of the bee work. Like everything in nature, however, nothing is completely 100% and so a few mites always manage to find a marginal cell and multiply there. But bees have another cure for this, and when they feel that parasites or viruses are too many and could threaten their survival, they use another defense mechanism, and that is swarming. By flying to a new habitat, a mite-infested colony actually restarts the whole organism. It interrupts brood rearing for a few days, thus reducing the number of parasites and starting again a new general construction and thus the already familiar cleansing construction and thermal defense mechanism.
Tím se omezí počty parazitů a počne opět nová generální stavba. A tedy námi známý očistný stavební a tepelný obranný mechanismus.